Welcome to this week's Impact Minds, where we're joined from the US by Steven Rogelberg, Professor of Organizational Science at the University of North Carolina, and Steven is author of The Surprise Science of Meetings. With me here, enjoying a bit of BBC tea, is Kate Cooper, Head of Research, Policy and Standards at the Institute of Leadership and Management, and Jesper Fredriksson is a General Manager at the cloud software company Okta, which has implemented, I think, Jesper, no meeting days to try to boost employee productivity and creativity. So I'm going to start by asking you all Steven first, in fact, what do you think is the worst thing about meetings? What characterizes the worst side of them for you?
Oh gosh, there's so much to say, but let me tell you. The research generally suggests that around 50% of time in meetings is effective, and that means 50% of the time it's not effective. So the things that drive me crazy are attending meetings that I really don't need to be there. The agenda is not compelling to me, it's not relevant, and the leader's just sitting in the back, kind of being a passive spectator to this disaster.
Okay, Kate. The worst?
The worst is the aimless feeling of why am I here? That level of distraction that we saw in the W1A kit. You're in a room with a group of people and they don't seem to want to be there. Their minds are somewhere else. They never end. The agenda is either ignored or absent. And you keep thinking, I've got work to do. Why am I in this room meeting when I could be progressing tasks somewhere else?
Jesper.
Like we just saw here, I think one of the things that frustrates me is this notion of multitasking. People believe they can be on their phone or the laptop or whatever. In reality, they can't. If they want to contribute and learn and really be active, they should be paying attention. That's probably my biggest bugbear.
So we've had a huge response, as you might imagine, on Twitter when I asked, are meetings a waste of time? And a couple of thoughts here. Lois Price, for example, sent us a tweet saying, she said, meetings were I've just realised about the BBC. Meetings were a specialty when I worked at BBC Music. Once we even had a meeting about the meeting that we were having to plan the meeting. I've heard this from several people. Also, a former UN spokesperson, Michael Bossacu, let me know that a common complaint among UN staff is they spend more time in meetings than actually in the field with beneficiaries. He says it's very frustrating if disasters strike. You need to get aid out, but interminably long coordination meetings keep us indoors. He can spend an entire day in meetings. So, Jesper, tell us what your company has done to try to stop this just taking over the culture.
Sure. So one of our core functions obviously is to develop software which requires attention and sort of deep thinking. And our engineering team actually 7 years ago, quite early in our history, came up with a very simple policy saying 1 day a week there are no meetings. You're basically dedicated to deep thinking, to focusing on whatever topic requires attention and not constant distraction. So therefore 1 day a week, 0 meetings.
Do you think that works?
Yeah, I think it works.
It helps? How?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think once you speak to people, it drives employee productivity. It certainly drives employee satisfaction. And when you speak to the people who work in this environment, they will tell you that just the ability to not be distracted and allow to go deep and stay in the flow on something that is complex and it requires deep thinking, that's what they benefit from. So it absolutely works.
Steven, if I can just come to you, I know one of your big issues is we spend a huge amount of time in meetings, but it's leading a meeting is a craft, is a skill, but we're not necessarily trained for it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So there are over 100 million meetings a day around the globe. And you would think with such a common activity, leaders would be trained to do it well, but our research suggests that only around 20% of leaders receive any training on how to run a meeting. And interestingly, the training they receive tends not to be very meaningful. So I'll give you an example. A common piece of advice that leaders get is have an agenda. Well, our research actually shows that having an agenda does not necessarily lead to an effective meeting. Instead, it's what's on the agenda. How do they solicit information to the agenda? And most importantly, how are they facilitating the agenda? So they're not simple solutions. We need people to receive training, but also training that's highly substantive.
And in a moment, I want to bring you in, Kate, on this, because we're dealing with people. But first, let me just give you a quick look at some of the types of attendees, the other people you may encounter in meetings. The company Work Done has come up with a list of workplace killers that we love, and I want to say maybe you recognise yourself in some of these characters. We've got a few here. The pilgrim takes the discussion so far off topic nobody remembers what the meeting was about in the first place. There's a lot of nodding going on in here. The nitpicker always points out small irrelevant details like a typo in a memo, can't see the bigger picture. The multitasker, we've already spoken about that, we all know them. Somebody so busy doing everything, they're doing nothing. And perhaps the most annoying of them all, the staller, who just when you think the meeting might finally be over, asks another question. Kate, you were nodding at some of that, but it is about people and managing people.
It is, and I think that's why there are so many. Whatever people say, they must like them, otherwise we wouldn't have millions every day. They are satisfying an important social need at some level, and all the motivations for going to meetings will be way off agenda. Might be because you dare not go, you'll think decisions will be made without you. You might just want to catch up with somebody and you know they always attend that meeting. So there'll be a myriad of reasons for being there.
And that can be positive.
Of course it can. I think that need to connect is really important. And I think actually more so today when we've got people dispersed, working flexible hours, working remotely, how are we going to help them connect if it's not through the meeting? It's much more important, like Stephen's been saying, is making sure the meeting works for everybody who's there.
Yeah, yes, but you didn't consider having a no meetings business.
No, absolutely not. Reality is that while sort of communicating digitally or remote on a video call like here is helpful, there's still no better way of forming a human connection and bond and really get your point across. So no, we absolutely still want to have meetings. We just want to make sure that we have a suitable volume of meetings, and when we do have them, that they're productive and effective.
And Stephen, you've spent, 20 years studying meetings scientifically. You're not saying we should bar the meeting.
No, I mean, a world without meetings is much more problematic. Meetings are essential for communication, consensus decision-making, cooperation. In many regards, organizational democracy takes place in meetings. It's an evolution from the command and control systems back in the Industrial Revolution. Right? It's a system that honors people's voices. So the chore is not getting rid of them, but just thinking more carefully about how can we elevate them? How can leaders become good stewards of others' time? And this is where I think the science is extremely helpful.
And Stephen, when you talk about empowering people's voices, I mean, we have all been in those meetings where they get hogged by a few people, and those who are quieter or more introverted or newer to the organization don't get a look in.
True. Yes, you're absolutely right. And so what I talk about in the book is I want leaders to start being more intentional. I want them to start making decisions, careful decisions about who needs to be there, what exactly should be talked about, but also what are the processes that should take place in meetings. For example, silence. Silence in meetings is an incredible technique for getting lots of voices to the table. The research shows that when people brainstorm in silence versus, let's say, brainstorming with their mouths, the silence groups produce nearly twice as many ideas, and those ideas are more innovative and creative because people can bring their full selves. They're not worried about interrupting people. They're not editing their ideas based on what others are saying. Personality doesn't matter nearly as much. So I'm not saying you should always do silence, but I want leaders to start being intentional and realize that they have lots of different techniques like silence that can improve meetings.
Kate, I also do executive coaching, and actually it takes quite a lot of courage to be silent.
Oh, you have to be brave to be quiet.
Yeah.
We need so many people who cannot stand the silence, have to fill it with anything rather than just the discomfort of the moment. But I think what's also important is how different we all are. Our linguistic styles vary between genders, across nationalities. So we might think we're making a point that's clear, and it might be absolutely not clear to somebody else. So that even the speaking needs thoughtful reflection, and also the listening. What is that person really trying to say? And I really do believe you need somebody in a meeting who will call out when they think those things are not happening.
Yeah, yes, but when you have your meetings on the other 4 days a week or whatever, how do you try to make them more effective so that all voices get heard and creativity can bubble up?
Well, I think some of the points that we hear here are obviously the basics, that you got to have a clear agenda. And certainly one of the things I personally try to do is, it's very easy to invite the broadest possible cast, but that's probably also the biggest mistake you can make. So really be deliberate on who needs to be here to contribute.
Yeah, no, I love the Jeff Bezos rule, Amazon. He has the 2 pizza rule. If there's more people than 2 pizzas can feed, there are too many people.
Yeah, and he also has another good rule, which is start by reading up on the topic, right? So I think the more you can be prepared and share information and people come in with a common context and understanding, the better this session can be.
Is it, Stephen, about redefining the meeting as well? I noticed Marissa Mayer from Yahoo, she has micro meetings. They're about 5 minutes long, a lot of them, but that's not really what most of us understand by a meeting.
Right. You know, the research shows that to have a good meeting, you don't do A, then B, then C. That's just not supported. It goes back to the intentionality and recognizing that depending on your group and your goals, there are a variety of different tools that you can use. Micro meetings have their value. Standing meetings have their value. Walking meetings can be extremely valuable. Let me share with you a new innovation in agendas that can also be valuable. So we often think about agendas as being a set of topics to be discussed. What I want to challenge a meeting leader is to structure their agenda as a set of questions to be answered. It's a very different activity. By thinking of it as a set of questions to be answered, it creates focus. You have a better sense of truly who needs to be at the meeting because they're relevant to the questions. You know when to end the meeting because the questions have been answered. And if you just can't think of any questions, it likely means you don't need a meeting.
Right, I like that. Being clearer about when we absolutely don't need a meeting. And Kate, also being clearer about how the meeting is meant to benefit or empower the people who are in it.
Yeah, well,
it's not just a form of power play.
No, exactly. And if you've done coaching, you know how you can coach in 5 minutes. You can have a meaningful and purposeful conversation with somebody virtually anywhere at any time in the day. And the idea that only happen when we've booked a room and we've got tea and biscuits is just deluded. Similarly, often the agenda isn't what really needs to be talked about. And if you stick to your agenda, where do we get those creative ideas that people co-create together? I think meetings, as I said before, have so many purposes, but what we need to all get better at is conversation.
That's a really good point at which to end. I'm calling this meeting to a halt, okay? And Kate and Jesper and Stephen in North Carolina, thank you all for being with us. I can tell you our viewers are very, very interested in this and are still firing off ideas.